I'm so excited to have Dr. Debi Silber with me today. Dr. Debi is the founder of the PBT, the Post-Betrayal Transformation Institute. She's a holistic psychologist. She's a health mindset and personal development expert, and she's an author. I'm so excited to have her here as part of this conversation. Welcome, Dr. Debi.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to our conversation.
This is awesome. And I know you're going to talk to us today about how an unhealed betrayal impacts your health, your work, your relationships. But I'm hoping before we dive into that, you can tell me a little bit about your story, like what brought you to this point where you're doing this kind of amazing work.
Yeah. Well, I don't think anybody says, I think I want to study betrayal. No, never. You study because you have to. And I've been in business over 30 years. It was health and then mindset and personal development. And then I had a really painful betrayal from my family, thought I did everything I needed to do to heal from that. And then it happened again a few years later. This time it was my husband. That was the deal breaker. So I got him out of the house and I looked at the two experiences thinking, okay, what's similar to these two? Of course, me, but what else? And I realized I never took my own needs seriously. Boundaries were always getting crossed. And I'm one of those people who believes if nothing changes, nothing changes. So here I was, 4 kids, 6 dogs, a thriving business. And I said, you know what? I'm going back for a PhD. And it was in transpersonal psychology, psychology of transformation and human potential. I didn't know how I was going to pay for it. I didn't know how I was going to manage the time, but I just knew like a book wasn't getting me out of this mess. I needed something bigger. And then it was time to do a study. So I studied betrayal. What holds us back? What helps us heal? And what happens to us physically, mentally, and emotionally when the people closest to us lie, cheat, and deceive? And that study led to 3 groundbreaking discoveries, which changed my health, my family, my work, my life.
That is awesome and amazing. And I love the fact that you were able to see the pattern, that you had these 2 betrayals and looked for commonalities, because in my work with victims of narcissistic abuse, it's so similar. It's more of the rule than the exception to go from one narcissistic relationship to the next, to the next, to the next. Even if it's not romantic partners, it's business partners or employees or acquaintances, friends, whatever. So that's fantastic. So,
yeah, and that's really what happens. It's not that these relationships are good. They're just so familiar. We're like, oh, I know how to work this. I know what to do. I know my place here. Yeah.
exactly. And I think that it's easy for the other person, the toxic personality or the betrayer in your case, to pick up on that and to know those things like choosing to not have our own needs met, choosing to people please, to accept blame when it's not ours. Those kind of things are just sort of a massive blessing to the person who's looking for that type of relationship.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we actually on some level call these people into our lives to give us an opportunity. People say all the time, is it our fault? No, but it is our opportunity, where there's this profound lesson needing to be learned. You are lovable, worthy, and deserving. You need better boundaries in place, whatever it is. Until and unless you get that, you're going to have opportunities in the form of people to teach you.
I totally agree. I think I wrote an article maybe a year ago about 16 life lessons I wouldn't have learned except if had it been for this narcissistic abuse. And I think there's an element of, and I agree with you, it's not victim blaming. It's not that the person did anything wrong, but there was an opportunity to heal this core wound that they wouldn't have known existed if things hadn't gotten so bad.
Exactly. And then when they do, like, look, for me to enroll in a PhD program, I had never done anything that big on my own. It wasn't anything in my realm of consciousness to do anything for myself. But look, it changed everything. I mean, then those 3 discoveries were made and it changed everything. And now, thankfully, the lives of thousands of other people. So trauma well served.
Very well
And I'm
served.
happy to share the discoveries if you want to hear about them.
I would love to hear about them.
Sure. So the first one was originally I was studying betrayal and post-traumatic growth. And for those who aren't familiar, post-traumatic growth, I look at it as the upside of trauma, how any trauma, death of a loved one, disease, natural disaster, whatever, leaves you with a new awareness, perspective, insight you didn't have. But I had been through death of a loved one and I'd been through disease. And I was like, nope, this feels very different. To me, I didn't want to assume it was the same for my study participants. So I asked him, if you've been through other traumas besides betrayal, does it feel different for you? Unanimously, they said, oh my gosh, it's so different. And here's why. Because it feels so intentional, we take it so personally. So the entire self gets shattered and has to be rebuilt. Rejection, abandonment, belonging, confidence, worthiness, trust. So like when you lose someone you love, you grieve, you're sad, you mourn the loss. You don't lose your ability to trust. You don't take it personally. Right. So that type of healing needed its own name, which is now called post-betrayal transformation. So that betrayal is a different type of trauma was the first discovery.
That's huge. And it is so true. I mean, one of the things that I talk about with trauma all the time as I'm sharing with people about it, teaching people how to release it, is that the trauma is not necessarily, the emotional trauma is not necessarily what happened. It's the story we tell ourselves about ourselves that is the problem. So I can totally see how in a betrayal, it becomes, oh my gosh, I'm not worthy of love, or oh my gosh, there's something wrong with me that even this person doesn't want to be with me, or whatever. It becomes the story that we're telling ourselves about ourselves that is the problem. Whereas you clearly don't have that with a death or with a major illness or injury or something else.
Exactly. And when you're telling yourselves that story, you're creating so much trauma within the body, which was the second discovery. And what we learned was there's a collection of symptoms, physical, mental, and emotional, so common to betrayal, it's now known as post-betrayal syndrome. So we have our post-betrayal syndrome quiz on our site to see to what extent people are struggling. We've had easily over 90,000 people take it. And what's so interesting is, the first thing is we've all been taught time heals all wounds. I have the proof that when it comes to betrayal, that's not true.
Right.
There's a question, right? There's a question on the quiz that says, is there anything else you'd like to share? People write things like, my betrayal happened 35 years ago. I'm unwilling to trust. My betrayal happened 15 years ago. Feels like it happened yesterday. So we know you cannot count on time. You can't even count on a new relationship to heal it. Healing needs to be deliberate and intentional. And I'm happy to share some of the stats from the quiz if you want to hear them.
Oh, absolutely.
Sure. So now imagine 90,000 plus people, just about every country's represented, men and women. Out of all of them, 78% constantly revisit their experience. 81% feel a loss of personal power. 80% are hypervigilant. That's exhausting. 94% deal with painful triggers. Anybody who's had a trigger knows how painful it is. The most common physical symptoms, 71% have low energy, 68% have sleep issues, 63% have extreme fatigue, your adrenals have tanked. 47% have weight changes. In the beginning, maybe you can't hold food down. Later on, you're using food for comfort. 45% have a digestive issue. That could be anything, Crohn's, IBS, diverticulitis, you name it. The most common mental symptoms, 78% are overwhelmed, 70% walking around in a state of disbelief, 64% are in shock, 62% can't concentrate. So imagine you can't concentrate, you have a gut issue, you're exhausted, you still have to go to work, you still have to feed your kids. That's not even the emotional ones. Emotionally, 88% experience extreme sadness, 83% are very angry, and you could bounce back and forth between those two all day long. 82% are hurt, 80% have anxiety, 79% are stressed, just a few more. Here's why I wrote trust again. 84% have an inability to trust. That one just killed me. 67% prevent themselves from forming deep relationships because they're afraid of being hurt again. 82% find it hard to move forward. 90% want to move forward, but they don't know how.
It's staggering. And I love that we're having this conversation, because I think the people that you work with and the people that I work with, our work overlaps to such a large degree. Because while not everyone who has experienced betrayal has been a victim of narcissistic abuse, many people who have experienced narcissistic abuse feel betrayed. And I can tell you that the people in my community that I work with, I'm sure would reflect those symptoms back to the exact same degree. And to what you said earlier, that time does not heal all wounds. It's one of those expressions that just drives me bonkers, because it misleads people into thinking that this will just go away, that they can just distract themselves and buckle down and try to move forward, and it doesn't work.
Not at all. And that was actually and that was the third discovery. But I just want to finish up with this one. What's even crazier about it, you didn't hear me say any number, 20%, 30%. These numbers were high. This is the part that was shocking to me. It's not necessarily from a recent betrayal. These stats, think about it. This could be from your parent who did something awful when you were a kid. This could be from the girlfriend or boyfriend who broke your heart in high school. So think about this. That person may not know, care, remember. They may not even be alive. And here we are today with these symptoms because of something unhealed from decades ago. That's the part that's just so crazy. I mean, the good news is we can heal from all of it, which was the third discovery. And happy to go into that one if you want to hear.
Absolutely. Let's hear more.
Okay. So, because it'd be really weird if you were like, no, I don't want to hear okay. Anyway, for me, the third discovery was the most exciting. And what was discovered was, while we can stay stuck for years, decades, a lifetime, right? And just as we mentioned, if we're going to fully heal, and by fully heal, I mean having those symptoms of post-betrayal syndrome to that completely rebuilt place of post-betrayal transformation, we're going to go through 5 now proven predictable stages. And what's even more exciting about that is we know what happens physically, mentally, and emotionally at every one of those stages. And we know what it takes to move from one stage to the next. Healing is entirely predictable. Happy to share the stages if you want to hear them.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's what's mapped out. We have it all mapped out in Trust Again. It's all we do within the PBT Institute. It's what all of our coaches are certified in. I'll give you a boiled down version right here. Stage 1 is before it happens. So if you can imagine 4 legs of a table, the 4 legs being physical, mental, and emotional and spiritual. What I saw with everybody, me too, was a real heavy lean on the physical and the mental, thinking and doing, and kind of neglecting or ignoring the emotional and the spiritual, feeling and being. So if a table only has 2 legs, easy for that table to topple over. That's us. Stage 2, shock, trauma, D-Day, discovery day. This is the scariest by far of all of the stages. And it's the breakdown of the body, the mind, and the worldview. Right here, you've ignited the stress response. You are now headed for every single stress-related symptom, illness, condition, disease. Your mind is in a complete state of chaos and overwhelm. You cannot wrap your mind around what you just learned. This makes no sense. And your worldview has just been shattered. Your worldview is your mental model, the rules that prevent chaos, right? Don't go there, trust this person. This is how life works. And in one earth-shattering moment, every rule you've held to be real and true is no longer. The bottom has bottomed out on you, and a new bottom hasn't been formed yet. So this is terrifying. But think about it. If the bottom were to bottom out on you, what would you do? You grab hold of anything you could to stay safe and stay alive. And that's stage 3. Survival instincts emerge. It's the most practical out of all of the stages. If you can't help me, get out of my way. How do I survive this? Who can I talk to? Who can I trust? Like, how do I feed my kids? Here's the trap though. Stage 3 by far is the one where most people get stuck and stay. And here's why. Once you've figured out how to survive your experience, because it feels so much better than the shock and trauma of where you just came from, we're like, whew, okay. And we think it's good. And because we don't know there's anywhere else to go, we don't know there's a stage 4 or stage 5. Transformation doesn't even begin until stage 4. But because we don't know there's anywhere else to go, we plant roots here. We park here. We're not supposed to, but we don't know that. And 4 things happen. The first thing is we start getting all those small self benefits from being here. We get our story. We like our story. We get to be right. We get someone to blame. We get sympathy from everyone we tell our story to. And on some level, that's all we're getting. So that feels good. So we plant deeper roots. Now, because we're here longer than we should be, Now the mind starts doing things like, maybe you're not all that great. Maybe you deserved it. Maybe this, maybe that. So we plant deeper roots. Again, we're not supposed to be here, but we don't know. Now, because these are the thoughts we're thinking, well, this is the energy we're putting out. Like energy attracts like energy. So now we start calling situations and circumstances and even relationships towards us to confirm, yup, this is where you belong. The misery loves company crowd, they find you now. Here's where you join some lame support group that keeps you stuck, because if you heal, you don't belong anymore, right? And if that weren't bad enough, it gets even worse. I'll get you out of here though. Because it feels so bad, but we don't know there's anywhere else to go, right here, we resign ourselves. We're like, this stinks, but I gotta get to work. I have to get through my day. So we start numbing, avoiding, and distracting. So right here, we start using food, drugs, alcohol, work, TV, whatever, to numb, avoid, and distract. So think about it. You do it for a day, a week, a month. Now it's a habit, a year, 10 years, 20 years. And I can see someone 20 years later and say that emotional eating you're doing, or that drinking, that numbing in front of the TV, do you think that has anything to do with your betrayal? They would look at me like I'm crazy. They would say it happened 20 years ago. All they did was put themselves in stage 3 and stay there. Does that make sense?
It does. Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's why I wrote From Hardened to Healed. The trust again maps out all 5 stages, but everybody was getting stuck in stage 3. I'm like, you know what? You guys need, you stage 3ers need a book just for you. So, you know, it's like the worst of it happened already, but to stay there in that place, that's the tragedy. That's where you have the symptoms and the illnesses and the crappy life and all of that. You owe it to yourself to at least go through that transformation. So anyway, if you're willing, willingness is a huge word right here. If you're willing to let go of the small self benefits, grieve, mourn the loss, bunch of things you need to do, you move to stage 4. Stage 4 is finding and adjusting to a new normal. Here's where you acknowledge, I can't change what happened, but I change what I do with it, right? Right there in that decision, you're turning the stress response down. You're not healing just yet, but you just stopped the massive damage you were creating in stages 2 and stage 3. Stage 4 feels like, if you've ever moved to a new house, office, condo, apartment, whatever, all your stuff's not there. It's not quite cozy yet, but you're like, okay, we can do this. It feels like that. But think about it. If you were to move, you don't take everything with you. You don't take the things that don't represent who you want to be in that new space. And what I found was there's one spot going from stage 3 to stage 4. If your friends weren't there for you, you outgrow them right here. And people say to me all the time, what the heck? I've had these friends 10, 20, 30 years. Is it me? Yes, it is. You're undergoing a transformation. And if they don't rise, they don't come. You don't bring them. Anyway, when you've moved into this mental space, you're making it cozy, you're making it mentally home, you move into the 5th most beautiful stage. And this is healing, rebirth, and a new worldview. The body starts to heal, self-love, self-care, eating well, exercise. You didn't have the head for that earlier. You know, now you do. Your mind is healing. You're making new rules. You're making new boundaries based on the road you just traveled. And you have a new worldview based on everything you see so clearly now. And the 4 legs of that table, in the beginning, it was all about the physical and the mental. By this point, we're solidly grounded because we're focused on the emotional and the spiritual too. Those are the 5 stages.
It's awesome. It's just fantastic. And I can see so many corollaries with my own story and with the people that I work with, because I see 5 stages of healing from narcissistic abuse as well. And everyone gets stuck in my stage 3, or, you know, what I've found to be stage 3. It's so common that people get to that place where they're now surviving. They've shifted some mindsets. They've learned maybe how to set a few boundaries. They've learned some practical skills. And there's just this sinking in element of, well, this is just as good as it gets.
Exactly.
And I think that I'm so blessed that I was too stubborn, really. I mean, it was purely stubbornness to accept for myself and my kids, my 5 kids, that this was as good as it gets. Like, no, like, I was born on fire. Where's that woman? Like, how do I get her back? And what I found on my journey as well is, as you describe, as you move into the higher stages, not only do you get your life back, but your life becomes more than you ever dreamed it could be.
Oh,
because
exactly.
because
Yeah.
those beliefs that you're not good enough or that you're not worthy or whatever are not only impacting your relationships, they're impacting your career and your wealth, they're impacting your impact on the world, your health, all of it. So I love the way that you articulated the steps and the stages. It's just so true, so awesome.
Yeah, thank you. And you know, it's so interesting. We had a retreat. And it was really for people kind of in stage 3, but willing to move through the stages. And and it was so interesting because we had 11 people. We're supposed to have 12. One got COVID. We had 11 there. And do you know that four of them out of the 11 have within the last month or so created new businesses. And you may think, well, what in the world does a new business have to do with healing? Here's why. When you've moved through your trauma, two things kind of happen. One thing is, holy moly, if I can heal from that, I can do anything. And the second thing is you open yourself up to things that you never would have had access to. Like the PBT Institute, that was a stage 4, stage 5 thing. You know, these things happen where when you are stuck in that stage 3, you're you know, it's like the person who's like, how are you? I'm fine, I'm okay. You know, it's like if I have a place to go Monday morning, it's okay. If my kids aren't in trouble, it's okay. If I can button my pants, it's okay. Like what? Like that's the begin. Like, why is that the goal, right? So, and I think most people, they spend their energy trying to be okay with stage 3. I mean, we have so many people who, you know, initially they come in to PBT and they're like, well, I just want, like, their effort is on, how do I make it okay? How do I make my betrayal okay? Like, that is the whole wrong line of questioning. You
It
don't make it
is.
okay. You become someone that blows your mind. And if that person wants to rise to step up to who you become, you have a 2.0 relationship. Here's the other thing too. Rebuilding is always a choice. Whether you rebuild yourself and move along, that's what I did with my family. It wasn't an option to rebuild with them. Or if the situation lends itself, if you're willing, if you want to, you rebuild something from the ground up new with the person who hurt you. And that's what I did with my husband. So not long ago, as two totally transformed people, we married each other again. New rings, new vows, new dress, and our 4 kids is our bridal party. Betrayal will show you who someone truly is. It also has an opportunity to wake them up to who they temporarily became. And it's as big of a shock for them as it is for the one betrayed.
That's really well put. I'm sure that that's true. It's
Not everybody.
interesting.
I mean, certainly not everybody. We have one of our programs is for the betrayers. And I'll tell you, I meet with them every month. And these are people who have the whatever, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. They realize they just blew up the lives of the very people who trusted and counted on them and who loved them and who believed in them. And they're taking the work seriously. Now, I'm not saying that's the case with all betrayers, certainly not. But with some, 100%, I see it every day.
That's incredible. And I think, you know, the stages 4 and 5 for me, and this is more of the process, not the process they're in, but the process they go through, are extracting the trauma and connecting deeply to the truth of who they are. And what I find is that, and what I found for myself, as I extracted my trauma, as I connected to the truth of who I am, which is someone that is enough, that's not too much, that is worthy, all of those things, right? There's this element of tapping into what I call your why. It's like, it's more than your passion. It's more than your purpose. It's why you are here on earth in this moment. And you have to express it. There's this like intrinsic need to fulfill that mission, that why. And it sounds like that's what you found with the people who are starting new businesses. I think that is a huge reason why it's so common, because it's no longer about the surviving and what do I need to do to keep this job that's and what do I need to do to stay in this world that's You know, I actually, when I was in that phase many years ago, I actually told a therapist, and this was a therapist as being a doctor, it was part of our health system and whatever. He was a psychologist who was fantastic, but I actually told him my goal of therapy was to learn to tolerate the intolerable.
Mhm.
I said those words out loud, like that was your stage 3, or
Yeah.
you know.
Absolutely. And that's where all the diseases come from, and the illnesses and the symptoms. And then people spend so much time, effort, energy managing stress related symptoms. And at the root of it is an unhealed betrayal. Like you heard me say, 45% of everyone betrayed has a gut issue.
They
They
just
can go to the most well-meaning, incredible gut experts. I'm friends with them, some of the best on the planet. However, if that gut expert doesn't know that there's an unhealed betrayal at the root of it, they're hacking away at the leaves. They're managing the symptoms at best. They're not dealing with the root cause, which is that unhealed betrayal, which does not go away on its own. It needs to be deliberate and intentional. When you move out of stage 3 into stages 4 and 5, those symptoms all heal, every one of them.
That's totally true. That has been my experience as well. And
Mhm.
having worked as a doctor, it was one of the reasons that I started studying trauma. Was it was so frustrating to see people who, they go to one doctor after the next, they try this, that, and the other thing, none of it works. Or seeing the woman in her 40s who is exhausted and not just tired, like she needs to go to bed an hour earlier, but like so exhausted she couldn't enjoy her job, she couldn't enjoy her family. And from a Western medicine doctor standpoint, it was like, are you anemic? Is your vitamin D normal? Is your thyroid normal? Do you have sleep apnea? If not, I got nothing.
Well, think about
Whereas,
it. The typical profile, right, is that woman you're talking about. So she's exhausted. So then she starts using sugar and caffeine for energy. So now on top of it, she's gaining weight. She's so frustrated and anxious. So her doctor puts her on a mood stabilizer or anti-anxiety medication. So her adrenals have tanked, her immune system is shot. So now she doesn't have the resistance that she did. So that's the typical profile. And then all the symptoms that come from it, and all she's doing is managing the symptoms. And I'll tell you, there were 3 groups in the study who did not heal. One was the group who was medicating, avoiding, distracting, that may have made the day a bit easier to get through, not without a price. The second, this was the group, they had their story, they were sticking with it. They were betrayed. That was the story. That was it. The third, this was interesting. This was the group where the betrayer had very little consequences. So whether it was out of financial fear, not wanting to break up a family, religious reasons, that was a big one. They did everything they could to turn the other cheek and put it behind them. I saw 2 things with this group. Number 1, a further deterioration of the relationship. And 2, this group was the most physically sick.
oh, for sure, because they're saying no to themselves. Every
Exactly.
time they say yes to someone else when their body is screaming no, and they say no to themselves, they fear abandonment of the other for financial reasons, religious shaming, whatever, but they've abandoned themselves in turn. And that is it has far greater consequences.
Exactly. And it was so obvious with the symptoms and the illnesses that they had.
Yeah, that's it's extraordinary. I'm curious what your experience has been, or your approach to getting people to shift from 3 to 4, because what I find is there are so many people who just, they've left the relationship, they've done therapy, and they just think life's as good as it gets, and they have no idea that life is so much better on this other side. That it's beyond what they could comprehend or what their mind could even imagine right now. How do you encourage, or how do you get people to start walking that path?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, we have so many people coming into PBT with therapy trauma. The most well-meaning therapist, but if they are not highly skilled in betrayal, it does more harm than good. If anything is going to glue you to stage 3, it's unpacking your story week after week after week without a
Yes.
strategic plan to move forward. So we see that all the time. The other thing is, if someone joins just some lame support group, now think about it. What you have in common is your trauma. So if anything is going to sabotage you, it's healing. because
Right.
you're going to outgrow your people and you don't want to outdo that. Or if you're, and this is, we see this because of couples counseling all the time. The couples therapist, well-meaning, but they don't know. The goal is just to get you both okay. So what happens is the person who needs to heal will sabotage themselves because they're afraid of outgrowing the other person. So there are so many things that we see, and everything that we do within PBT. It's all research based. It's what the study proved works, and it's just it's interesting because it used to be that I said we help people who've been betrayed, and I realized not everybody who's been betrayed wants the help. It's for people who are ready to heal from their betrayal. Very different groups. Very different groups.
That is
One
true.
group thinking they're in so much pain and they can't possibly imagine anything other than that. That's become their identity. So they're not going anywhere, because we never want to be without an identity, and if they can't possibly imagine themselves without that story, there's nothing I can do to help them. But the ones who say, okay, you know what, clearly I'm seeing enough examples of people who've moved through it. Like they see me, for example, I didn't do anything they couldn't do, and there wasn't a roadmap. For goodness sakes, there's a roadmap now for them. All of our coaches, they've all been through it. We have so many of our coaches have been through the program. They're so excited about what they've done. They want to become our coaches and practitioners. So they see enough examples and then they say, okay, you know what? I don't get how I'm going to do it, but if they did, I can too. There's got to be a willingness, though. If there's not a willingness, and then they think it takes a long time, and it doesn't. I mean, the ones I work with, 6 months or less.
Yeah, for me too.
Yeah. And it's
Which
just
is
so worth it.
huge if you think about it, because I think there's a statistic that says it takes about a fourth the duration of the relationship to heal from it, so a 20-year relationship, it would take 5 years. First of all, if they're not committed and dedicated to actually healing, and they just go into the next relationship or whatever, it's not going to be healed in 5 years. Like you said, they're going to be sitting there 35 years later still with the same problems.
Mhm.
But it also doesn't have to take 5 years.
No.
I also get it done in 6 months or less.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be longer than that. And that's the thing, they need to be willing to do that work. When they just are so miserable and they just want another relationship, where they just want that relationship back, the only thing you can guarantee is more of the same. That's the guarantee. You
Yes.
have to be, just, if you're willing to go into the unknown, the unfamiliar, there's a new life waiting for you. But and really everything we've ever done at one point was unfamiliar. So if you're just willing to do this new thing, look where it could take you. It could take you to a version of you that would blow your mind, and it'll take you to potentially a new relationship with the person who hurt you, or someone new, that is on such a different level, that you never would have had access to if you didn't do this work. Now, and I tell everybody in PBT, this is the hardest and the most transformative work you'll ever do. It's a reckoning. You are taking on yourself, you're taking on your ego, you're taking on every belief you've ever had, and you are recreating yourself from the ground up.
Oh, I totally agree.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the term that it's a reckoning is really true. I mean, when I looked back years ago at all of the people who had harmed me in some way, it was hard enough to think that, this family member had abandoned me, or this relationship, person I love abandoned me, or whatever. But when I realized that I had actually abandoned myself by tolerating the intolerable, by staying when I should have ran away screaming, by all of these things. And it's not so much a judgment, like I screwed up. It was just like this awareness. Oh my gosh, I abandoned myself. And that pivot point was painful, and it changed everything.
Yeah, because you realize, you did that probably for, to, as a means of survival, or it was the best you knew at the time. And then, you do something different. And I feel like if you learn something, you're kind of obligated to share that. How do you not share something that can really help somebody? I mean, I just think that's a crime right there, whatever it is. So, it's like when the 5 stages showed up, I was like, how do I go back to business as usual here? And I'm a private person to talk about betrayal. Like that's the stuff gossip feeds on, right? And
Right.
but it was the kind of thing where this could really help a lot of people. So get out of the way.
It's wonderful that you're doing this work and helping all of these people. But tell us a little bit about how someone can find you, how you can help.
Yeah, well, everything is at the PBT, as in post betrayal transformation, the pbtinstitute.com. Yeah, we have, we have starter programs where it's just 3 months for the betrayed, it's called Reclaim, and a 3-month program for the betrayer, that's called Rebuild. And within that amount of time, they see our coaches, and our coaches specialize in everything. They're all certified in the 5 stages, but they're bringing decades of experience in whether it's chronic pain, narcissism, divorce, reconciliation, partners of sex addicts, whatever it is. And this way, our members come in, they easily know what stage they're in. We have a way of determining that, and then they take all the classes and the coaches, for stage 2 until they get to stage 3, and then they do everything from stage 3 until stage 4. So they really are put on a track just to move from one stage to the next, and that's why they don't really need to be there very long. And for the betrayers, it's an interesting program too, because they have our coaches and they have me on a group call, and we give them programs as well. And they are signing up to do some deep, intense work. There's no shaming, no blaming, but they are taking it really seriously. And very often, the couple just emerges as two totally different people.
Well, and isn't that beautiful when that can happen, that they end up growing together and being able to come back together where their paths diverged for a period of time.
Well, it's like they both grow separately, actually. They both get to their physical, mental, and emotional
Yes,
best, having nothing to do with the other person, and then they meet up again
being able to
as
come back
two,
together.
yeah, two 2.0 versions of themselves. That's exciting.
That is exciting. That's very exciting. Do you have any words that you'd like to leave us with? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I would say, well, first of all, I know how painful it is. I've lived it. I look at it as one of the most painful of the human experiences. This was the person you loved, you trusted. This was the person who gave you a sense of safety and security, and that's the person who took it away. Having said that, I also know that even though it happened to you, it's not about you. It really isn't. So you owe it to yourself. You owe it to yourself to move through the stages. So at the very least, you can live as that version of you that is waiting to be birthed at the other end of the stages.
That's awesome. Beautiful. Thank you so much for your time this morning. I think this is wonderful. And we'll drop your link to the PBT Institute in the description as well.
Thank you.